Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello, welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson, and in this episode, I'm going to be talking about how you can be the peacemaker in your relationship and not lose your power. You know, something that happens in every relationship is we have conflict, and handling that conflict is something I've talked about before, but you know what comes up from time to time is you have roles in relationships. Somebody probably is generally the peacemaker and extending the olive branch and making that overture to try to bridge the breakdown in communication. And it happens for all kinds of reasons. Now, what sometimes becomes a dynamic here is that when you have a breakdown and you see the person is trying to extend to themselves to create some harmony, sometimes we tend to look at that person who's doing the giving at that point, the being vulnerable, the trying to make peace. Sometimes we see that person that, well, they must have been the wrongdoer. And sometimes that's the case, but then oftentimes it's not. And that's just a part of that person's personality, is they like to have peace and harmony. Well, what tends to happen sometimes is that when you're that peacemaker and you're trying to negotiate with your partner about mending fences, about trying to overcome what's been the breakdown, if they perceive you as being weak and then themselves always being right, then that sort of sets up this sort of ugly spiral. And if you don't learn to look at your partner as not being weak and vulnerable, but if you recognize that your partner is doing it out of love and not because they're doing it from being always wrong, then you can have respect for your partner. And it's just what happens and how we can begin to look at this differently so that we don't always see that person that's coming to us as, looking at them through our filter, if I could use that word for you. Because if you have a perception that they're always wrong and that they're coming to you because they're always having to apologize, that sets up something that you're going to have an impression on about them, that they don't have merit when they want to bring one of their grievances to you. So I like to challenge you to see that a little differently. See that when a person is coming to you, extending the olive branch, trying to make peace, they're not doing it out of weakness. They're doing it out of love. And sometimes when things happen to us, it's hard for us not to see that they have an ulterior motive, meaning that they don't have something that they're trying to hide and they're trying to get something from you. It's easy to want to perceive that because, especially if you've been wronged, it's hard to trust. But if we could just kind of set that aside a little bit, I mean, we can make that a part to talk about, but we want to set that aside so that we can begin the dialogue of coming back together and healing. And again, I want to start with the person who, when you're being approached by someone who wants to make peace with you, see that they're doing it from a place of love, not that they're trying to manipulate you. Because if you read it through that filter called manipulation, you're not going to trust anything they have to say. And we want to start that from a different place. Because look at it, spin this around. Look at it from their point of view. If they're coming to you and they're being vulnerable, that's taking a huge risk because you could accept them or not accept them. And not being accepted by the partner is a devastating blow. It hurts. And it's hard to continue to be vulnerable on that level. So if you give them an opportunity to try to represent themselves, then I think we want to have a good outcome here. And it's looking at it from that standpoint that we're trying to have an outcome where we both get our needs met. Now, you both have to take time to speak and be heard. And I certainly talk about giving equal time and setting time limits for something like this because we don't want to beat it to death. But for the person that is doing the speaking. That is bringing this up so that we can mend the fence. You have to understand about yourself that you want to say that you're doing this from a place of love, because if you're doing this from manipulation, it's not going to work, because they're going to see right through you. There's already a bit of mistrust to begin with. I mean, or else there probably wouldn't have been the breakdown and the upset. But if you look and you come to this from a place of being honest, now you have to be honest about what we're talking about. You really can't come to the conversation making a bunch of you statements and things that put other people on the defensive, because you're trying to mend a fence here. You're not trying to win a war, because there's battles that should be picked, but you do them on the merits of what we're discussing and not just to win, because ultimately you're going to lose. You may win the battle, but you're not going to win the war with your partner, because you may wind up finding yourself without a partner. So you have to learn to negotiate, and you have to do it from the heart. So as you discuss this, as you take this forward, it's important to remember that you're doing it from a place of love, and convey that emotion, that this isn't about winning, but this is about us both being heard, and that I want to say to you, I'm bringing this up for discussion. And you may have a lot dumped on you. It may push your button of patience to actually be there and listening to your partner tell you everything they feel is wrong about you. Even though you're the one that brought the conversation up, you're trying to be the peacemaker. You're going to have to stand down and listen. And it takes a lot of patience to do that. And it may require one of my other podcasts, I talk about mirroring, which is repeating back to the person what it is they're upset about. And then it may take writing down notes, keeping track of what's going on so that you can get this done. Now, this requires practice. Being the peacemaker requires practice. A lot of people don't get this right. If you don't already know how to do this, you're going to crawl before you walk. So it takes a little while to get this worked out. Now, once that happens, once you kind of get this thing on track, you can kind of see that it picks up a little bit of momentum. And then you can sort of trade the role. You can kind of shift. You allow your partner to do a little bit of listening on your part. And, it may even be helpful when you start out on something like this that, start out on some common ground. You start talking about things that you both want, so at least it starts out friendly. And then you can kind of venture into some of the things that are a little more difficult, and possibly what brought this thing to a breakdown in the first place, you see, because ultimately we're trying to mend a fence, and you don't do it necessarily by tearing down everything that you value. So you got to value your partner. Have in mind what you want to say. It might be helpful that you write some of these things down so you can stay focused. And then get into the conversation. Be in a place that's neutral, and have your privacy, because obviously if you start talking about vulnerable things, sometimes people tend to lose their cool a little bit. And if that happens, try not to take that personal, because we realize we're getting into something that happened in the relationship that made people upset. So it's a process. But granted, when you learn to do this, when you learn to be the peacemaker, you are doing it from love, and that's powerful. You also can help your partner learn something about you that you're loving, and that as odd as that sounds, that may not be a perception they have of you. Especially if you're a person that tends to be, like alpha dog. You're constantly out there. You're loud. You're the first. You talk over the top of everyone. Well, you know what? It's kind of expected that if you're going to be the loudest one in the room, then you're going to have to be a leader about this. And that's an interesting concept. Sometimes people who are leaders and being the most loud and the first ones that are wrong are not the first ones to apologize. And they have to learn it, and they'll apologize with humility. How often we listen to someone go on and on and on about how right they are, but then when they're wrong, their apology it takes about as long as a flip on a light switch and they're done. Well, that's not right. That's not fair to the persons that you've done wrong. And really, you owe it to them to give them the amount of apology that, especially when you're wrong, you owe it to them to give them the amount of apology that when you were being wrong and accusing them of something, for example, because it takes a while to heal. It takes a while to heal from something like that. So again, I think you get the point that it is not a place of weakness to be the peacemaker in a relationship. Sometimes it happens with one partner doing that more than the other. But it's certainly helpful when your partner shares with you that duty, because obviously no one is right 100% of the time in a relationship. I mean, the expression is, even a stopped clock is right twice a day. It's important to keep in mind that we're doing this from a place of love. And we'll be right back after this message.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And welcome back. I'm John Johnson, and you're listening to Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast. I was talking about being the peacemaker in the last segment, and I'm going to talk about not being taken for granted and how that happens oftentimes. When you've been in a relationship with someone for a while, we get into these routines, and it's very easy to have a role in the relationship. You get into a routine, and it's just a part of our existence. And when you include somebody in your lifestyle, at least in the beginning, it's something of a change. So you make time for it. You tend to nurture it. You tend to bring it into your experience, and you sort of mold it, or you mold each other. And it's implied. You're going to embrace each other. You're going to make each other a part of your life. Now, over time, we learn to do these things, even conversation. We start doing these things in shorthand. For example, you notice that when you first meet somebody, the conversation can seem very long-winded, and you're learning the certain slang phrases, and you even have your own sort of secret code, or you're building on it. But as you get further and further into the relationship, then you tend to know how someone finishes a sentence. You tend to know how someone, when they glance at you with a certain look, you know all the meanings. And so it sort of becomes a shorthand, and it's a shortcut way of communicating. And that's what happens when you become familiar with somebody. That's great. That's wonderful. That's the intimacy. Those are the nuances of a relationship, and people love that. That's the juice. You go for that. Well, that happens over time, and so does the degradation of the relationship. When you use all of these shorthand, these shortcut methods of communicating, something that tends to get left out, because it's not necessarily worked into from the beginning, because you don't even think about it, but it's thinking about those shorthand, those shortcut ways. When I say shorthand, I'm thinking of quick, simple symbols, but it's those shortcut ways of showing appreciation, and you have to take time out for that. It's a different way of thinking, because we tend to do things for convenience, to tend to make them faster, to be more efficient. And when it comes to appreciating someone, see, that's kind of a different sort of feeling. You don't want to shortcut, if you're on the receiving end of that, you don't want to shortcut that. You want to get as much of that as possible. And it's about creating the space to do that. I mean, if you're doing things to make them faster, to make them more efficient for shortcuts, then obviously you should be telling yourself you're making time for something else. And not necessarily to make more shortcuts, but you're creating a space to do something that you value. And appreciating your partner would be one of those things. And wouldn't that be nice? If your partner likes flowers or likes something, whatever is special about your partner that they appreciate, and you understand this from their from their point of view. If you're creating shortcuts elsewhere, then you're making time for this, for appreciating your partner. That's part of the intimacy of a relationship. That's the beauty of it. Now, it can be exhausting. It's time consuming. But that's what you sign up for when you're in a relationship, right? To invest the time, to spend the time with them. And the thing is, when you don't, then you tend to find out that it's usually about feeling appreciated. And when you're not feeling appreciated, i.e. being taken for granted, then we tend to call out. And there's all kinds of signals that come from that. It could be in that shorthand way we communicate with each other. You might be getting the stink eye, or maybe you don't get their attention. Maybe you're becoming ignored because you're not paying attention to your partner. And it bears discussing, because you might find out totally that there was a misunderstanding, and you can work those things out by having dialogue about it. But thinking about when you're wanting to not have your partner feel taken for granted, you can have the conversation with them about what makes them feel special. In one of my earlier segments, earlier podcast, that is, I talked about love languages, and this is really one of those. I'm a person that likes the acts of service. Some people, it's touch. Others, it's words of validation. And with that, you learn something about your partner, and then you try to make them first and make them feel special. And it's okay to expect a reciprocation on that, because if you're putting out the work, you're doing it like it's an investment, and you want to be able to put into that relationship bank all the investment that you can so that you can depend on it. Think about this in terms of long-term relationships and what those kinds of couples do to make their relationship valuable. And the interesting irony is, we don't necessarily think about this when we're young, but if you kind of look into the future and you look at older couples, at some point, you have one person that may need to walk with a cane or with a walker, or may need a little help getting out of the car. One person may move a little slower than the other. But you notice how when those couples, those individuals have been together for a long time, how they have a way of not only communicating, but they nurture each other and care for each other. Well, that's because they invested long ago into that relationship bank to be able to have that. And mind you, taking your partner for granted does not make your investment go very far. So it's about investing into that and sort of planning for the future. And, even if you're not thinking long term in terms of your relationship, let's just say whatever the status of your relationship is, still be the kind of person that gives to the relationship. And however it ends up, at least you have something that you can reflect on, and it shows your character. That's beauty. That's sweet. That's an example, and you'll always be remembered for the good person that you are, even when relationships go different directions, or the individuals break up and go different ways. It's not always a very easy thing to discuss a relationship when it's degrading, or when people decide to separate, but you can do it with dignity. And if it happens to be one of those experiences for someone where they felt taken for granted, well, this is an opportunity for you to learn about yourself and how that happened and how not to make it happen in the future. So I want you to think about that and discuss it with your partner now. Give yourself the gift of that knowledge, and it applies not only to your significant other, but to your children, to your siblings, to your parents, grandparents. I think everyone can have this conversation, and it'll get you very far in life. And we'll be right back after this.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we're back. And I want to ask you a question. Have you ever thought about who your relationship role models have been? Were they TV characters, people that you admired in television in their relationships? Or were they your grandparents, maybe your neighbor's parents, your own parents? We are definitely influenced by the people who we've spent a lot of time around, teachers, coaches, any of these individuals that we've seen operate. But I want to suggest that we're most affected by our parents. That is, if you have your experience of a father who is a really strong personality, really strong character, women, you would probably gravitate towards the same kind of guy, even if he's abusive. But we'll talk about that subject at another time. But I'm talking about who you're attracted to and how that plays out in your selection process and possibly in your relationships and how you relate to that person. Guys tend to do the same thing. It doesn't matter whether it's a man or a woman, but we tend to choose as a mate someone who is very similar to our parents. So if you're looking at how you ended up with the person you're with, and I'm going in the direction of talking to those individuals that have a relationship partner who they feel fails them, and if there was something about that partner who they seem, and this is something I hear, women want to go out. You're in this marriage, you're in this relationship, this guy doesn't want to go out. He wants to sit on the couch. Well, did your dad tend to have some of those qualities as well? Was he sort of passive? If you had the kind of mom who may have been really in charge and sort of alpha mom and running things, and the dad was sort of a more passive kinds of person, then you may have taken on some of your mom, oh my gosh, I'm like my mother, and you have married a guy or in a relationship with a guy who is a lot more passive, because that sort of allows you to be that role of your mom, and it plays over again. So when those kinds of things happen, you need to look at that and see how that is. In one of my other segments, I talked about how you can negotiate with your partner and trying to achieve some change as in being the peacemaker. A lot of those same skills apply here. But what we're looking at in your selection process and about being conscious about those selection processes. So if you grew up and your parents had the kind of relationship that you didn't envy, and whether you're a child of divorce or a child of abuse or whatever, understand that you have a tendency to go back and choose the same kind of partner that your parent that your parent did. And that is, if you're a girl and your father, that is the person that your mother chose as a partner, and you see that, you probably stand a good chance of choosing the same kind of person unless you really make a conscious effort not to. So oftentimes, we see, now obviously people allow us to be who we are, and we're going to be that role, and somebody shows up in our lives, and when they fit that pattern, then we allow them in, and they sort of fill in the blanks for you. So it sort of meshes. It's like a jigsaw puzzle there. It can get really nuanced, but you get the picture here. And if you have a really passive partner, then look at yourself and how is it that maybe you're shutting that partner down? when you begin this self-examination, you may find a lot of things about yourself you don't like. But by and large, you look at that and say, wow, if you're a woman, you're saying, wow, was my dad sort of soft and passive like that around my mother? And you may find that's the case. Now, it's not necessarily a sign of weakness because he is being gentle, because a lot of women admire that. They like when a man is not so over the top macho, that he's a listener. But with that comes some of these other characteristics. And it can be difficult for a guy to navigate a lot of these things too. Because when you're in a relationship, men, as well as women, but men are asked to play a lot of different roles. It's not just the old thing you heard about in television where, men just work outside of the house and they come home and then it's the woman's domain. That's old. That was in television, many years ago. Now we have these roles in relationship in which they blend and we share, and in order to in effect have a happy life and be partners, these things are blurred. These lines are blurred, and there's no real definitive drawing a line in the sand that's going to make that work. So it's in the negotiation process. But as you think about what you want in a relationship, or before you choose somebody, this is really important. Look at your parents' relationship. Look at how the things that they did, what made them successful. I'm sure that they could tell you a great deal if you were just ask them. And hopefully they would actually be able to tell you about some of the things that don't work. It's not wrong to think that the things that don't work, or said differently, it's okay that there are things that don't work, and you learn how to discuss those without it destroying the relationship. I think people that have been together a long time can help explain that dynamic, that it's not a bad thing, that there are going to be disagreements, but you look at the overall picture of the relationship and what you want to have happen. And that's unity and harmony, and you work on those things, and you learn to have fun. And when those things happen that don't necessarily work so well, we try at fixing it, and we're not going to get it perfect, but we try at it. And I think that's an excellent example. And when you're looking for someone to be in a relationship with, you look for someone that exhibits these qualities. And I'm here to suggest that it takes a while to find out about a person. You're not going to know that the first couple of meetings. And long-term relationships know this, especially if they met, sort of got related and gotten this relationship going, and they stayed together a long time. They could say, wow, when we first got together, we stuck it out, but there were definitely some rough spots that could have, that could have broken the relationship apart. Well, I'm here to suggest that, that's the courtship. Let it take a while and learn about a person. And I'm real big on understanding what conflict does in a relationship. It's great when people are happy and getting along, but when there's conflict, that's going to teach you a lot about how an individual problem solves, how you get treated, whether it's going to be a me first or it's us. Because if they're willing to just cast you aside and save themselves, is that really the kind of person you want to be with? And if you grew up with that example, then be really mindful of those kinds of things which risk your emotional health and your well-being. When you're really young and you make mistakes with these things, there's time to recover. But when you've invested a great deal of your life in someone and these kinds of things happen, can you look back on it and see where you possibly may have been just turning a blind eye to things rather than dealing with them up front and possibly saving yourself the heartache? Because eventually it's all going to come back. It usually does. So that's part of the selection process. And the thing is, if you reach that spot where you find that things just aren't workable, then you do have a decision that you have to make, whether you're going to stay in that relationship or go, no matter how long it's been. There's processes for that. But I'm here to want to help you get the most out of your relationship, and I really do hope that you're happy. So, I'm John Johnson. You've been listening to Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, And I hope you're having a great relationship.